Now, some of the paleo proponents also will claim, hey, humans, we don't digest dairy very well. Therefore, we should not consume dairy products, right? And this is true for some people. However, what we found is that much of the population, I should say 40% of the population, has adapted to milk exposure. So there's the genetic mutation that keeps lactase, the enzyme that breaks down milk sugar, on after infancy. And it has to do with the fact that babies were exposed to milk after dairy became prevalent. So yeah, our bodies have learned to adapt according to the environment and the food supply. So that's pretty interesting. And then also, many people don't realize that they're what's called maldigesters. In other words, you can tolerate small amounts, like approximately 12 grams, which is the amount that's in about, one serving of dairy or a cup of milk or a serving of yogurt. So although people claim that they can't digest, they're lactose intolerant, many can still consume small amounts. So bottom line is the human body does adapt to what is exposed to. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't have survived all these thousands and thousands of years. Okay, another paleo fact check. Our ancestors did not eat grains, right? Well, again, scientists have discovered evidence of starch grains and tools in order to grind up the grains in these species or in these communities where Neanderthals lived. So there's evidence that, hello, people did eat grains in that time. And then what about the claim that the paleo diet is good because it eliminates grains which cause inflammation? So what we know is 1% of the population is inflicted with celiac disease. And celiac disease is the inability to tolerate the protein gluten found in grains. So 1% of the population, this is true for. Now, it's estimated that another 10% of the population, a small amount, has gluten sensitivity. So for these individuals, yes, it might be a good idea. In the case of celiac, you have to avoid it. In the case of gluten sensitivity, it's a good idea to probably avoid grains. However, for processed foods, highly processed foods, the refined grains, basically your junk foods, yeah, you can increase markers of inflammation, but it's typically in the presence of obesity and or chronic excessive calorie intake. So it's not the case just because you eat junk food, you automatically get inflamed. Now, it's not true for whole grains. Whole grains have been found to decrease inflammation, and they're also a good source of fiber, which is important for your microbiome, for your gut health. Okay, now what about this concept of legumes? So paleo proponents will argue legumes were not consumed, and they're bad for you because they contain anti-nutrients. So let's fact check that. Again, archaeologists have discovered residues of grains in legumes in paleofossilized human dental plaques. So basically the teeth of paleo men and women, you could see residues of grains and legumes. Also, anti-nutrients like phytic acid are neutralized with cooking, or either that, you have to consume such a large quantity in order for them to have a detrimental effect. For example, phytic acid in whole grains, it's got some benefit. It helps to bind heavy metals like lead and cadmium in the gut, and it also enhances our immune cells. So a lot of the claims around the paleo diet, they don't seem to be holding up when we do a fact check. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the paleo diet research. What does actual research show in terms of weight loss? So I took a look at a bunch of short-term studies, right, between 3 and 12 weeks. And what I found was that the paleo diet works. It has similar amounts of weight loss as the Mediterranean diet, which is a higher fat diet, right? You also show improvements in waist circumference and glucose sensitivity. It helps people feel fuller. So independent of calories and macros, it has a satiating effect, therefore helping to manage hunger. It also has benefits on health markers like blood pressure and blood fats. So all good outcomes for short-term trials on the paleo diet. Okay, here's what it also showed that about half of the people on paleo diet became deficient in calcium. People reported it being very difficult to adhere to. And in terms of inflammation, there were no significant improvements in the markers of inflammation like C-reactive protein. So got some benefits, and then it looks like, it's got some setbacks as well, which we're going to find with each of the diet. Now, the longest paleo study that I could find ended up being a 2-year study involving 70 obese women who were postmenopausal. And they were randomized to the paleo diet or Nordic nutrition recommendations, which is similar to our dietary guidelines for Americans, which doesn't eliminate any food group, but in the Nordic countries. So what they found was the paleo group lost significantly more weight in the short term at 6 months, but after 2 years, there was no difference. They also found similar improvements in blood pressure, C-reactive protein, which is what CRP is, a marker of inflammation, and cholesterol, but in terms of insulin and fasting glucose, there were no differences between the paleo diet or the general nutrition recommendations in these Nordic countries. Okay, so that was the longest paleo study that I could find.